Yep, a minor key for a minor year. But anyway, welcome to the Bonus Features Podcast, and today we're going to talk about movies and TV. 2020 was rough, as if that wasn't obvious enough. Hey, that rhymed. The point is, the movie industry last year was hit particularly hard, so there wasn't exactly a lot of new releases. So instead, what I'm going to do is a top 15 movies and shows I saw for the first time in 2020 but didn't necessarily come out in 2020 list. So yeah, basically none of these are going to be new except for one, but most of it was new to me, so close enough. But before I make it to my main list, I'll just rattle off some quick honorable mentions. Up first is Wheels on Meals from 1984, a solid Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung team-up, which features one of the all-time greatest fight scenes in movie history. Of course, that fight is between Jackie Chan and Benny the Jet Urquidez. Next honorable mention is Cowboy Bebop, the anime series from 1998. Now, the only reason it's not on my main list is because as of this recording, I'm only about halfway through, but it's absolutely amazing so far. Up next is Lord of War from 2005, a solid Nicolas Cage film that examines the business side of war, very similar to War Dogs. Then after that, I've got Blood Rage from 1987, also known as the alternative title Slasher. So I guess you could say Slasher is a solid slasher. Oh, whoops, damn it. I meant to say Slasher is a solid slasher. Man, I hate when I mess up a good punchline. Anyway, next is Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 from 1987 as well, featuring some classic overacting from Eric Freeman as the main character Ricky Chapman. This is a classic bad movie. Furthermore, I have two words for you. Garbage Day! Up next is 36th Chamber of Shaolin from 1978, a game-changing kung fu classic. If you'd like to hear more about that, there is a full review for that movie right here on the Bonus Features Podcast channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Up next is the 2007 anime series Gurren Lagann, also known by the name Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, or alternatively known as Better, More Fun, More Coherent Evangelion. Next after that was Freaky from 2020. This movie proves that the future of movies is genre mashup derivative ripoffs, not reboots or sequels. But seriously though, it was solid, and it's also the only thing from this list that was from 2020. And last but not least in the honorable mentions is The Mutilator from 1984, also known as Fall Break. A legendary cult classic slasher movie with some excellent makeup effects. Plus, if you don't like that Fall Break song at the beginning, well then, frankly, I respectfully have a differing opinion. Alright, so that'll do it for the honorable mentions. On to the regular list. So we start off with the movies section, so that's part 1. So in no particular order, I start off with Crawl from 2019, directed by Alexander Aja. Are you looking for a relatively simple and fun movie about alligators eating people during a deadly hurricane? Then Crawl is for you. To specify the plot a little more elegantly, as per IMDb, a young woman, while attempting to save her father during a Category 5 hurricane, finds herself trapped in a flooding house and must fight for her life against alligators. So, again, there's not much to say about this movie other than the fact that it's just great entertainment. Crawl sticks to the basics, which means it's able to focus on setting up the suspense rather than getting bogged down in lore and plot twists. Though, to its credit, there's enough backstory to ensure you have characters in which you are invested. Most of the story is cleverly contained to limited numbers of locations, and obviously the flooded house is the best of these set pieces. And I mean, that's not new to horror in that it's a contained location, but this one does a particularly good job is all I'm saying. But by far the most intellectual piece of analysis that I can offer about Crawl is this. Alligators are cool. Up next is Brewster's Millions from 1985, directed by Walter Hill. The genius of Richard Pryor knew no bounds, and Brewster's Millions is a prime example. As per IMDb, the plot is, a minor league baseball player has to spend $30 million in 30 days in order to inherit $300 million. However, he's not allowed to own any assets, destroy the money, gift it, give it to charity, or tell anyone about the deal. So the story of a man who has to spend an ungodly amount of money in order to get more money is a movie that's truly meant for the 80s. no wishing stone required. It is every bit as funny as it is a good satire about excessive wealth. Much of the comedy comes from the solid premise, and it is carried to its furthest potential in its star Richard Pryor. And I think this movie is just another great example of his ability to breathe life into characters in a way that you empathize with them. Also, one element that makes this work is that the rules are so firmly established at the beginning. In order to make the outlandishness of it work, they had to make sure to close all the loopholes. Well, why wouldn't he just gift it? Well, you can't do it. Why couldn't you give it to charity? Can't do that. They made sure to try to make it make sense. Unlike a certain movie and its rules that took place in the 80s that had Wonder Woman in it, called Wonder Woman 84. Seriously, that wishing stone shit made no sense at all. Max Lord was literally a walking, talking contradiction. Well, say hey there, fella. I thought you were supposed to be talking about Brewster's Millions. Ah, yes, you're right, Jim Dunn, Stu Knotts. How could I, off topic, yes. Anyway, my point is, Brewster's Millions had a good premise, and that made it a good movie. And it was very funny. Up next is Reanimator from 1985, directed by Stuart Gordon. Loosely based on the H.P. Lovecraft series, this movie takes gallows humor to a new extreme. A great exercise in macabre fiction, it manages to be hilarious and grotesque all at once. As per IMDb, here's the plot. After an odd new medical student arrives on campus, a dedicated local and his girlfriend become involved in bizarre experiments centering around the reanimation of dead tissue. This movie gave us a great anti-hero in Herbert West, who's played by Jeffrey Combs, and another strength is obviously the splatter effects. My goodness, plenty of blood, plenty of guts in this one. Another strength the movie has is the way it takes the realistic elements and injects them, no pun intended, into the more fantastical ones. I would say this is a must-see for horror fans. Also, I just want to quickly talk about the characters Dan and Herbert West. So Dan's his roommate. The roommate interplay is so strong in this one. It's like watching The Odd Couple, but you add in the fact that one of them's a complete psycho and is trying to bring back the dead. It's pretty great, and I would say that's actually another thing, is this movie is extremely funny. And I knew, there's a lot of horror movies that are funny or blatantly horror comedies, but I was surprised at how funny this one was. So again, I would definitely recommend this one. Next item I have on the list is Stepfather from 1987, directed by Joseph Ruben. While the dominant horror film subgenre of the 1980s may have been horny college students being killed in the woods, Stepfather manages to stand out as a psychological thriller. As per IMDb, the plot is as follows. After murdering his entire family, a man marries a widow with a teenage daughter in another town and prepares to do it all over again. So I guess you could say amicable divorces are not this fella's strong suit. But anyway, Terry O'Quinn makes this a superb watch with his performance as our lead villain, Jerry Blake, who is as cringy and dorky as he is creepy and psychotic. He really nails the dichotomy of the character, which is that he's so full of shit and you know he's hiding something. Because Jerry Blake as a character, he's this guy who just tries way too hard to be squeaky clean and family friendly. In a weird way, it kind of reminds me of like Danny Tanner from Full House. Wait a minute. Danny Tanner. But he told the girls that their mother died in a car accident. Unless, of course. Alright, dumb fan theories aside, the point is Stepfather is great because it offers a little bit more in the method to the madness department instead of your average stalk and kill slasher. But hey, I didn't just watch brain-rotting popcorn action films and slasher movies. I occasionally tried one of those newfangled smart people movies. And one of those was Good Time from 2017, directed by Josh and Benny Safdie. This one is about a despicable piece of shit named Connie who uses his brother Nicholas to help him pull off some heists, but shenanigans ensue. And by shenanigans, I mean Connie must figure out a way to get his brother Nicholas out of jail. From its dizzying cinematography to the natural dialogue, it manages to capture the essence of the grittier side of New York City. In a lot of ways, the movie operates as a character study that examines what drives people to resort to crime. It's in a lot of ways similar to Uncut Gems in that it's a very stressful movie. There's not a lot of time to just stop and smell the roses in this one. And a lot of that can be attributed to the directors of this, who also directed Uncut Gems. And another thing I'd like to remark about this is that New York City feels like another character. That's a thing I say a lot about good movies, but I think when you have a setting that is as important to the story as the characters, it kind of helps elevate things. Get ready for this. I actually have another Smart People movie on this list, as shocking as that might be. And that movie, of course, is Memories of a Murder from 2003, directed by Bong Joon-ho. This was such a thoroughly engrossing movie that it blew away any apprehension I had about it possibly not being able to measure up to Parasite. This was every bit as good, if not more, though in some ways it's hard to compare the two. The movie is loosely based on the true events of South Korea's first serial murderer in the late 80s and early 90s. As per usual, Bong Joon-ho uses a mix of dark humor, captivating cinematography, and a heavy usage of theme to craft a true masterpiece. The ideas of guilt versus innocence, righteousness versus corruption, the exhaustive nature of detective work, limited resources, and the burden of proof are all explored in great depth through the lenses of extremely imperfect and human characters. Would definitely recommend. This is a fine piece of movie making. And in the for what it's worth category, if this list had rankings, I'm pretty sure Memories of a Murder would be number one. Next up is American Animals from 2018, directed by Bart Layton. A true standout movie because of the way it goes back and forth between real-life interviews and dramatizations. It challenges the notion of telling the truth through the medium of movies. The story is about university students in art school who hope to pull off a heist of rare and valuable art books from the school's library. In addition to taking an interesting approach to telling the story itself is very intriguing. I liked how it was essentially a movie about trying to pull off a DIY heist instead of an ultra-slick, professional, high-octane one. To further demonstrate this, the movie is kind of an anti-movie in that there is a heavy usage of subversion of tropes. And to further talk about this movie and why I liked it so much is a lot of true story movies are kind of bullshit, or they'll change little things that don't matter, but you could still, think that something actually happened when it didn't. This movie really tries to attempt as closely as possible to get down to the bottom of things and get to the truth. And it kind of shows you that when you're dealing with interviewing multiple people, it's very hard to get the same story out of everyone. So that's why I thought this was such a clever movie. Up next is Dragged Across Concrete from 2018, directed by S. Craig Zahler. There's something to be said about why the specifics matter, and Dragged Across Concrete exhibits this perfectly. The story revolves around two suspended policemen who make a journey into the criminal underworld, but find more than they originally bargained for. Dragged Across Concrete proves it has brains and bronze by providing both the spectacle and the intrigue to give this movie the complete package. Put simply, the movie's approach is that meticulous setup is what leads into more rewarding action scenes, rather than action scenes that just happen. With multiple narratives being weaved together in a clever way, much of the movie's strength comes from the script. Couldn't help but realize, isn't it great when one person writes the script instead of a committee of 1,000 people? It's almost like the story's less generic and more streamlined when it's one person. Another thing this movie did a good job of is kind of portraying murky morality, similar to Tarantino and the like. And it's kind of one of those movies where it's like a gangster movie where no one's exactly right in their actions, but you're just kind of interested to see how it plays out anyway. And I guess there's kind of the element of, well, who's more wrong? And that was one thing that made this a fun watch. And honestly, of the movies I've seen of the last, I'd say 2 or 3 years, this was maybe the least predictable one. There's a lot of different elements of the story that are built up one way, but don't necessarily pay off like in the typical way. I'll just leave it at that. It's not an easy one to call the shots. Up next is American Ninja from 1985, directed by Sam Furstenberg. This movie is probably one of the most quintessential B movies of all time. From the producers that made Death Wish a bunch of times comes another over-the-top, ass-kicking, zany action extravaganza called American Ninja. If you want to hear more about this one, just go to our review on the Bonus Features podcast channel. We go into painstaking detail discussing such things as bad guy accents and proper sword throwing technique. Oh, by the way, why not subscribe and click the bell? Apparently you will never see anything ever unless you hit that bell. Coming in at number I haven't been counting is Magic from 1978, directed by Richard Attenborough. This is one of those movies that's so good it's almost infuriating that I hadn't seen it till recently. As per IMDb, the movie is about a young ventriloquist who is at the mercy of his vicious dummy while he tries to renew a romance with his high school sweetheart. This movie is definitely a psychological trip that keeps you guessing throughout. The masterful acting of Anthony Hopkins and Ann-Margret bring this story to life with such gravitas that it will make you forget that you're watching a movie about a stressed-out man who plays with dolls for a living. Overall, I'd say it's a smart movie about never underestimating dummies. I'm sorry, I just couldn't resist that one. And while this next point, it's not the central part of the plot, it is an interesting theme that the movie explored, and that's how showbiz is always changing and there's so much pressure to conform to certain molds. And that's kind of one of the major hurdles that Anthony Hopkins' character is trying to overcome. Up next is The Invisible Man from 1933, directed by James Whale. Well, color me surprised. I thought this one was going to be super boring, but it turned out to be an instant classic. Obviously, the Universal monsters are revered and well known, but the Invisible Man seems to be in many ways the most human of all of them. In fact, the plot kind of nails this home. The story is about a scientist who finds a way to turn himself invisible, but the side effects of his concoction make him murderously insane. Thus, not a lack of living matter as in Frankenstein's monster or the Mummy, and not purely animalistic rage as in the Wolfman. The drive is just human madness. This makes Claude Rains' performance as Dr. Jack Griffin extra chilling because of the little sliver of humanity that slowly slips away over the course of the story. While some of the special effects don't quite hold up by today's standards, the ones that do deserve extra recognition, especially considering that the movie is from 1933. What is additionally impressive was the attention to detail, such as the rules of his invisibility and the process in which his enemies try to catch him. Ah yes, rules. They seem to make movies good. Unlike certain movies. Wonder Woman 84, I'm looking in your direction again. Seriously, someone just wished for world peace. The movie's over. Alright, but back to Invisible Man. They did actually, indeed, even in 1933, address the idea that someone might just dump paint on him and that's how they can catch the Invisible Man. So it's not like they didn't cover all the bases, and that's one thing I thought was particularly impressive about that movie, in addition to it just being overall fantastic. Next I have The Blackcoat's Daughter from 2015, directed by Osgood Perkins. You know that feeling when you hear a band and you think that they suck, but then it turns out you just have to look at their earlier work and then you realize that their early work is amazing and then all of a sudden life is a lie? That's how I felt about this movie. The plot as per IMDb. Two girls must battle a mysterious evil force when they get left behind at their boarding school over winter break. My first introduction with Osgood Perkins was with 2020's Gretel and Hansel, and well, saying it was as exciting as watching paint dry is an unfair insult to paint. So, much like listening to Ride the Lightning after listening to late Metallica, I realized that I was too quick to judge his abilities as a whole. The Blackcoat's Daughter is a perfect mix of deeply disturbing and entertaining that I seldom see out of newer horror films. And for the record, 2015 is still newer as far as I'm concerned. Wait, what year is this? I don't even remember. I've been locked inside for so long. But seriously, the use of parallel storylines, plant and payoff, and the overall eerie atmosphere make for an excellent viewing. So that'll do it for the movie section. On to the TV part. By the third month of the pandemic, I was so bored that I resorted to odd and desperate options to pass the time. Reading books and actually finishing them, hanging up posters instead of leaving them in piles on tables, playing Spyro Enter the Dragonfly and actually beating it. Seriously, that f***ing tank level, infuriating. And even watching anime. Now hold on, I can explain myself. In the form of a jingle.
Alex might not be an anime guy, but sometimes he's willing to give it a try. So he pops on a stream or DVD and doesn't know what the hell he will see.
So to kick off the TV section, but it's mostly just anime, is a series called Noir from 2001, directed by Shigeru Kitayama. The story revolves around two female assassins who go on a journey to seek answers about their pasts, but in order to learn the truth, they must confront Les Soldats, a secret organization that has operated in the shadows of humanity for centuries. First of all, look up the theme song for this show. So damn catchy. For real, just Google Coppelia's Casket. Secondly, this is one of those anime series that has an overall darker tone, but still has all the trappings of a great spy adventure. It also dabbles in other anime subgenres, such as slice of life, drama, and purple-haired characters being weirdos. The most central strength of the show is the two main characters, Mireille and Kirika. Though they are assassins, they are both very human. Since Kirika is overly shy and Mireille is overly confident, their clashing personalities add a nice layer to the overall story. I highly recommend this series because it has a little of something for everyone. Except for people who don't like anime whatsoever. If that's the case, this has nothing for you. Next series that I thought was real rad was Parasite: The Maxim from 2014 to 15, directed by Kenichi Shimizu. Now this is not to be confused with the other thing that's called Parasite, which is also excellent. Body horror is generally not a favorite genre of mine, but I always try to keep an open mind. I was glad I did because this anime about a parasite taking over a teenage boy's hand and fighting other parasite monsters was surprisingly heartfelt, funny, action-packed, and downright amazing. The show's handling of the parasite creatures is one of the more fascinating elements of the show, and the nuanced approach manages to add an element of believability. The theme of biology plays a big part in the entire series, and it brings up some interesting ideas. I can't say too much about these creatures without spoilers, so I'll just say they're not your average invasive species. Additionally, the show is at times very funny because of the odd couple relationship between Shinichi, the teenage boy who is the main character, and Migi, the creature that overtakes Shinichi's hand. As a side note, I watched the dub and I thought the American voice cast did a particularly good job. And last, and certainly not least on my list, is Erased from 2016, directed by Tomohiko Ito. This might be an exaggeration, but I'm pretty sure this is the best anime series I've ever seen. It's one of the few series that, like Cowboy Bebop, transcends the medium of anime itself because it is that good of a story. What I'm trying to say is if you are a giant weeb and you are desperately trying to convince your friends to try an anime, this could be the one. As per IMDb, it's about 29-year-old Satoru Fujinuma, who is sent back in time 18 years to prevent the events leading to his mother's death, which began with a series of kidnappings in his 5th grade year. The show's best quality is its ability to engage the audience in the mystery aspect as well as the character aspects. Satoru's need to solve the case is complemented by him and his interactions with his friends, thus Erased avoids feeling too cold or too procedural. Well, okay, maybe scratch that part about it not being too cold because it takes place during winter, and it's one of those things where you just feel cold watching it because everyone's talking about shivering and it's not warm enough. Anyway, simply put, it is a beautiful work of fiction that runs through the gauntlet of emotion from poignant to hopeful in a way that is completely unexpected. Another strength is the exploration of themes: regret, guilt, childhood, the passage of time, trauma, abuse, and what it takes to be a hero. I promise it's not as depressing as I'm making it sound, but there are definitely some rough parts in this one. Overall, I would give this an 11 out of 10, because I said so. So go ahead, watch this one. It's on Netflix. Or at least it was at the time of this recording. And that'll do it for the TV section, so that's the whole list. So that concludes my list of things I watched in 2020, but mostly didn't come out in 2020, something top 15 video. What did you watch for the first time this year? Feel free to sound off in the comments. Thank you for listening to the Bonus Features podcast. If you like what you heard, please remember to hit the like button. Please do not smash the like button, that is extreme overkill. Also remember to subscribe and hit the bell so you can stay up to date on all the latest Bonus Features podcast content. And to find us on social media, we're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Shout Engine, Facebook, and kind of, but not really, Twitter. So until next time, keep watching movies.